A few years ago, I moved into a new apartment building. It was a standard 8-floor building with a mix of students and young professionals. Everything seemed normal at first. The walls were thin, the elevator was a little slow, but nothing out of the ordinary. I'll never forget my first week in apartment 5C. It was just a regular Thursday night. I was having a quiet evening, and I went to bed early for a work presentation the next day. But around 2 a.m., I was woken up by a loud, sharp knock on my door. It was strange because no one ever came to my door at that hour, but I decided to ignore it. The next morning, I ran into a neighbor I hadn't met yet in the hallway. Her name was Claire, and she was in her mid-30s, slightly older than me. We exchanged pleasantries and she asked how I was settling in. I mentioned that the night before, I had heard knocking on my door. Her face turned pale. She looked almost concerned. She told me to be careful, that I should avoid the apartment at the end of the hall, room 8E. I was puzzled. I'd never seen anyone go in or out of 8E. And when I asked her why, she simply said, "People who live there don't stay long." I brushed it off, thinking she was just trying to spook me. But that evening, something strange happened. As I was walking down the hall, I saw a door that I swear had never been there before. It was at the very end of the hallway. I hadn't seen it before, and the door was completely different from the rest. It was an old, weathered door, like it hadn't been touched in years. The number 80 was faded, but still visible. I decided to check it out. The handle was cold, and when I turned it, it opened with a creak. Inside, it was a perfect replica of my apartment. Same furniture, same layout, same everything. But everything was off. The air felt thick and heavy, like the room hadn't been disturbed in ages. There was a strange humming noise coming from the far corner, like an old appliance that hadn't been turned off for years. I quickly backed out and slammed the door shut, my heart racing. I called T explain what I had just seen. I ran back to my apartment, locked the door, and tried to forget about it. But that night, I heard the knocking again. The same sharp, urgent knocks on my door at exactly 2 a.m. This time, I was paralyzed with fear, too scared to get out of bed. The knocking continued for what seemed like hours. The next day, I went to speak with the building superintendent. When I asked about room 80, he seemed genuinely confused. He told me there was no such room in the building. I insisted that I'd seen it, but he just stared at me with a blank expression and said, "There is no room 80. There never was." That's when I started to lose it. I walked down the hall again, and there it was, room 80. Exactly where it had been before. But this time, it was locked. I knocked on the door, and a voice from inside answered, "I'll be out in a minute. Just give me some time." I didn't know who was inside, but it couldn't have been Claire. She had moved out weeks before, and I hadn't heard anyone mention renting out the apartment. But that voice, it sounded exactly like her. I started to investigate, calling neighbors, going through old tenant records. But every time I looked into the building's history, it seemed like the information had been erased. I couldn't find a trace of Claire or anyone else who had ever lived in room 80. The whole building was wrapped in a thick veil of secrecy. I tried to leave. I couldn't take the constant knocking, the eerie hum from the room, and the feeling that something or someone was watching me. But when I went to the front desk to sign out, the receptionist told me the same thing. There is no room 80. My search has led me to dead ends. I am not sure what I am dealing with, whether it has something supernatural, or if I've just lost my mind. But I can tell you this, I haven't heard the knocking for a while now. I am afraid to say it, but I think it might have found someone else. I haven't heard the voice in the hall anymore, but I still see the door. Every night, I hear the hum. And sometimes, when I am alone, I swear I hear Claire's voice whispering through the walls, "Don't leave. It is too late now."